When your child betrays you, it doesn't sound like breaking glass. It sounds like silence. That was the sound in my house the day I found out. Silence so heavy it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The coffee had gone cold in my hand, and I remember staring at the faint swirl of cream still floating on top, thinking how something so small could still try to mix, to belong, even when the rest of it had turned bitter. My name is Claire. I'm 46 years old, a single mother, and for the last 15 years, I've been trying to build a life steady enough for my daughter, Emma, to stand on. She's 16 now, tall, sharp-tongued, and full of ideas I don't always understand. I used to think we were close. I used to think she knew how much I'd given up to make her dreams possible. But that morning, that cold, gray morning, I found a letter from the bank sitting on the kitchen counter. It wasn't one of those thick, confusing envelopes filled with charts and small print. No, this one was thin, quiet, almost polite. Your account has been flagged for unusual activity. That's all it said at the top. At first, I thought it was a scam. You know how they send those fake alerts to get you to click something? But my heart knew before my brain did. My hand was trembling before I even sat down to open my laptop. The account they mentioned wasn't just any account. It was my secret one. The one I'd been building quietly for almost 9 years. Ever since Emma started kindergarten. My college fund, I used to call it, though no one knew about it. Not even my own mother. I opened my online banking, typed the password carefully twice. The screen blinked, loaded, and then I froze. Balance, 112 Barnes 4080s. It used to be over 28,000. Back then, life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, where the rent was reasonable and the neighbors minded their own business. Every morning I'd wake up at 5:30 before the sun and make coffee that filled the place with that warm, toasty smell, like hope itself. Emma's door was always half open, a mess of clothes spilling out like a hurricane had passed through. She'd stumble out 10 minutes before the bus came, still half asleep, complaining about the Wi-Fi or her hair or the way her jeans didn't fit. But that was okay. That was our normal. I worked as a medical billing clerk at St. Vincent's Hospital. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I knew every paycheck down to the cent. Every month, I'd set aside $100 in that hidden account. Sometimes more if I skipped lunch or worked extra shifts. That account was my promise. To her and to myself. A future where she wouldn't have to struggle like I did. We didn't have much, but I tried to make our home feel safe. We had hand-me-down furniture from my sister, and I'd light a vanilla candle every evening to mask the smell of the downstairs neighbor's cigarettes. On weekends, we'd cook together. Her specialty was boxed mac and cheese with extra butter, and we'd watch reruns of Friends until she fell asleep on the couch, head resting on my shoulder. Those were the quiet joys of motherhood. The kind that make the years slip by without warning. Then came the shift, the first sign that something was changing. It started small. She began dressing differently. Not bad, just expensive. A new phone case here, a pair of branded sneakers there. I'd ask, "Where'd you get that?" And she'd shrug, "Oh, I used my allowance." But the math didn't add up. Her attitude changed too. Sharper, impatient. She used to hug me before school, even on bad days. Then one morning I leaned in and she pulled away. "Mom, stop. I'm not a kid. Teenagers. You tell yourself it's normal, that they all go through phases. But this one felt different. Like she was standing in a room I couldn't enter anymore. At night, I'd hear her laughing softly in her room, the glow of her phone lighting up her face. I'd knock and she'd roll her eyes. "Mom, privacy, please." I told myself it was okay. I didn't want to be the clingy mother, but one thing about motherhood, your gut always knows when something's off. The next clue came one afternoon when I went to the grocery store. My card declined. I thought maybe the machine was broken, so I tried again. Same result. The cashier gave me that look, the kind that says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but also, please hurry up." I felt my cheeks burning as I pulled out my backup card, the one I rarely used. That night, I checked all my accounts. Everything seemed normal, except that one, the hidden one, but I didn't check it that night. I didn't want to. Instead, I made dinner, chicken stir-fry, and we sat across from each other like strangers. She was scrolling through her phone, giggling at something. "What's funny?" I asked. "Nothing," she said, eyes still glued to the screen. I watched her, the way her fingers moved so fast, how her nails were suddenly polished, her lashes thicker. It hit me that she looked older than 16, older than the girl I used to know, Emma, I said quietly. "You been buying a lot lately?" She shrugged, still scrolling. "Just stuff I need." "Like what?" "Mom, why do you care?" Her voice had that sharp teenage edge, the kind that slices deeper than it should. "Because I pay for the Wi-Fi you use to scroll all day," I said, trying to sound calm. She sighed dramatically. "God, you're so controlling." Controlling, that word stung more than it should have. I bit my tongue, took a breath, and changed the subject. But that silence, it grew between us. A week later came the bank letter, and with it, the truth I never expected to face. When I saw that balance, my heart stopped. I refreshed the page 3 times, like maybe the screen was wrong, but it wasn't. Every transaction was there, time-stamped, logged, Amazon, Sephora, Zara, Uber, DoorDash. The list went on and on. I scrolled until my fingers hurt. My chest felt tight, and then I saw it, her name, Emma L. Turner. The withdrawals were all digital transfers. She'd linked my hidden account to her Apple Pay. I sat back in my chair, staring at her name like it was a stranger's. She had found it, my secret, my years of sacrifice. Gone. For makeup, fast food, and a weekend trip to Montreal I didn't even know she took. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, numb. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of the refrigerator humming. Steady, oblivious. Outside, a car alarm went off and then stopped. The silence came back heavier than before. That's when I heard the door open. Her laughter, the faint jingle of keys. She walked in with a smoothie in her hand, music playing faintly from her earbuds. "Hey, Mom," she said casually. And for the first time in 16 years, I didn't know who I was looking at. I didn't know what to say. How do you start a conversation when your whole world has just been shattered? She looked at me, casual, like nothing was wrong. "Hey, Mom," she said again, taking a sip of her smoothie. The cold strawberry scent wafted into the room, but I could barely smell it. All I could smell was the burning inside my chest. I set my laptop down slowly, trying to keep my hands steady. My heart was pounding in my ears. "Emma," I said, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. "We need to talk." She raised an eyebrow, dropping her bag by the door and turning to face me. The earbuds slid from her ears with a soft click. "About what?" she asked, sitting down on the couch, twirling the smoothie straw. I didn't speak immediately. I just watched her. The way her hair was styled in that perfect, expensive way. The way her nails gleamed with that shiny polish I didn't recognize. She looked so grown up, so different, like a stranger. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. She blinked, confused for a moment. "Find out what?" I pulled up the bank statement on my laptop. I didn't want to, but I had to. It was right there, right in front of me. "You drained my savings," I said, my voice cracking. "You took it all." I could see the color drain from her face. I watched her try to piece together the shock in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "I don't know what you thought," I continued, my voice stronger now. "But that money wasn't for you to spend. That was for your future. She closed her eyes for a moment, like she was trying to collect herself. And then she stood up and crossed the room, her voice getting louder, more defensive. Future? What future, Mom? She tossed her hands up. You never listen to me. You never care about what I want. It's always about your plan for me, your perfect future. I had to do something. You don't support me. You don't support my future. I sat there stunned. Her words hit harder than I expected. She didn't even seem guilty. Just angry. I support you, I said quietly. I've worked my ass off for you. You didn't listen. She yelled, her voice cracking now. You didn't see what I needed. All I ever wanted was to not feel like I was being planned out, like I had a right to choose something for myself. But you just thought you knew everything. She was pacing now, and I could feel the anger building in her, but I couldn't figure out how to meet it without making things worse. I wanted to scream at her, tell her how many sleepless nights I'd spent working just to save for this one thing. I wanted to tell her that her future was about sacrifices I had made, the dreams I put on hold for her, the time I'd lost, the opportunities I'd given up. But all that came out was, Emma, you used my money. You broke my trust. She stopped in her tracks. For a moment, the tension in the room hung like a thick fog. Then she shook her head. You don't get it, Mom. You never will. She turned, grabbing her phone from the table. I don't need this lecture. I don't need your sacrifices. You just want to control me. That was it. That was the moment everything shifted. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about what she took or how she took it. It was about the years of misunderstanding, the growing distance between us that I never saw coming. I was losing her. Before I could say anything else, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The sound of it echoed in my ears. I sat there staring at the empty space she left behind. The cold reality of what had just happened settling deep into my bones. The next few days felt like a blur. I went to work, went through the motions like a machine. At home, I barely spoke to Emma. When I tried, it was like speaking to a wall. She'd go into her room and lock the door, and I'd sit at the kitchen table, wondering where I went wrong. I couldn't talk to her, not the way we used to. And I couldn't just pretend like everything was fine. Then, one afternoon, the bank called me. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional. Ms. Turner, this is Laura from Wells Fargo. We've been notified of some unusual transactions on your account. The transfers were flagged as potential fraud. The word fraud hit me like a punch to the gut. Fraud? I echoed. What are you talking about? That's my account. Yes, ma'am. But the transactions appear to be unauthorized. We've also received a formal request to reverse the charges. I could feel the blood drain from my face. What request? The request was made by your daughter, Emma Turner, she said, her tone sympathetic. She stated that the transactions were made for personal use, but we're processing it as if it were fraud. It's a legal matter now. I felt my stomach twist into knots. She what? I whispered, almost unable to breathe. She's asking for the money to be reversed? Yes, ma'am. We're advising you to address this immediately. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. The house felt colder, emptier than before. I was angry, hurt, but what terrified me most was that the situation was no longer just between Emma and me. It was something bigger now, legal, official. The bank had to get involved. That night, I sat in the kitchen, watching the clock tick away. The house felt like a shell. Emma wasn't home. I hadn't heard from her all day. The phone call still echoed in my mind. What was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to fix this? I didn't even know what to say to her anymore. I couldn't just be angry, but I also couldn't ignore what she'd done. I heard the door open later that evening, the soft click of the lock. She was home. She didn't come into the kitchen, though. I heard her retreat to her room. I didn't go after her. I sat there frozen as the minutes stretched into hours. Would she apologize? Would she finally see the mess she'd made? Or had the damage already been done? I had no idea. The next few days dragged by in a haze. I couldn't sleep, not really. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing the hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the apartment settling around me. I would close my eyes, but all I could see was the balance on that screen. 112.48, a small number, but it carried the weight of 1,000 missed moments, 1,000 quiet sacrifices. It felt like my whole world had come crashing down. But the hardest part was seeing Emma pull further and further away. She stopped responding to my attempts to talk. She wouldn't answer her phone, wouldn't make eye contact when I saw her at home. The silence between us was suffocating, but in a way I was just as guilty of it. I didn't know what to say to her anymore. I kept replaying the words she'd said. "You don't support my future. You never listen." Was she right? Had I really been that blind to her needs, to the kind of person she was becoming? I didn't hear from the bank for a few days, but when they called again, I knew it wouldn't be good news. "Ms. Turner," the voice on the other end was steady, impersonal. "I wanted to inform you that your daughter's claim to reverse the charges has been processed. However, it is still flagged as fraudulent. The next step will involve a formal investigation." My heart dropped into my stomach. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "It means that the bank will proceed as if the transactions were unauthorized," the voice continued. "If we don't hear from you within the next week, we'll have to proceed with the legal process to recover the funds." The coldness of her words hit me like ice. It wasn't just a matter of getting the money back anymore. The bank was treating it like a crime. I closed my eyes, trying to hold back tears. This wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to go to court. I didn't want to see Emma get in trouble. But what was I supposed to do? I couldn't just let her get away with taking what wasn't hers. It was on the 5th day, after the bank had called for the second time, that I finally decided I needed to confront her again. I had to. I knocked on her bedroom door, the soft rap of my knuckles sounding like a plea in the silence. "Emma?" There was no answer. "Emma, please open the door." I waited for what felt like an eternity before I heard the faint shuffle of footsteps. The door creaked open just a crack. Her face appeared, pale, her eyes avoiding mine. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice softer this time. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to make her run again. She just stood there, not saying anything. "I'm not mad at you," I continued, my words more fragile than I intended. "But this isn't just about the money. It's about trust, Emma. I've worked so hard to give you a future, one that's safe, one where you don't have to worry. And you took that from me. You've made it so much harder than it had to be." She crossed her arms, her gaze still not meeting mine. "You don't get it. I had no choice. You've been controlling everything, Mom. You always want to tell me what's best, but you don't listen to me." "Emma," I said, stepping closer, trying to meet her eyes. "I do listen. I listen every day when you talk about your dreams and your plans. But the way you went about this, maybe I'm not who you want me to be," she interrupted, her voice rising again. "Maybe I don't want to be the perfect little daughter you've imagined. Maybe I just wanted to be me." Her words hit like a slap. The anger, the hurt. It all mixed together, and I could see it now. She wasn't a child anymore. She was a teenager, figuring out who she was, who she wanted to be. She was trying to break free from the box I'd put her in, but the way she'd done it, taking my hard-earned money, without a second thought, that was something I couldn't ignore. "Emma," I said, my voice steady now. "You didn't just hurt me by taking the money. You broke my trust. And right now it feels like you don't even care." "I do care," she said quickly, but her voice was shaky. "I'm sorry, She trailed off, and I saw the flicker of regret in her eyes. But it was too late. I sighed, rubbing my temples, feeling the weight of the past few days crash over me. I didn't know what to do anymore. I wanted to make it all right, but the damage had been done. "Why didn't you come to me first?" I asked softly. "I would have helped you, Emma. You didn't have to do this alone." She looked down at the floor, shifting her feet. I didn't think you would understand. I didn't think you would let me have any control. I stepped back, letting out a long breath. I was trying to give you control, in my own way. But this... I don't want to go to court, she whispered, the words barely audible. I looked at her, my heart aching. Neither do I. The next day, I took action. I called the bank, and we began the process of negotiating repayment. The bank was firm in their stance, but they also recognized that the situation wasn't a typical case of fraud. Emma's name was still on the account, and she had used it, but the intention wasn't malicious. It was a simple misunderstanding, at least in their eyes, but in mine, it wasn't so simple. I sat Emma down that evening, explaining what I had done. I told her that we'd worked out a repayment plan with the bank. She would be responsible for paying back the full amount, along with the fees they were charging for the fraud investigation. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best we could do. I don't want you to think I'm doing this to punish you, I said, looking her in the eyes. But you have to understand that actions have consequences. You can't just take what you want and think there won't be fallout. She nodded slowly, the weight of the situation settling in. I'll pay you back, she said quietly. I'm sorry, Mom. I never meant to hurt you. For the first time in days, I saw her sincerity. The wall between us was starting to crumble, but I knew it would take time to rebuild. The next few weeks felt like both a fresh start and the longest waiting game of my life. Emma and I began our uneasy truce. The repayment plan the bank had set up wasn't ideal. It wasn't like I could just forget about it or act like it never happened. But the conversation we'd had, that raw honesty, seemed to be a turning point. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were finally talking to each other. At least that's what I tried to convince myself. I didn't expect her to suddenly become the daughter I remembered. We didn't go back to hugging after every fight, and we didn't sit together and watch movies the way we used to. But the tension had eased. We weren't enemies anymore. Every week, Emma would sit at the kitchen table after dinner, papers spread. Out in front of her, bills, receipts, her phone with the bank app open. I'd look over occasionally, just to make sure she was sticking to the repayment plan. She never complained. She never asked for anything from me. It was strange, watching her take responsibility for something she'd once tried to hide. But part of me felt a strange sense of pride. She was learning. One evening, a few months after all of this had started, I was sitting on the couch, reading a book I'd picked up from the library. The living room was dim, the kind of dim where everything feels soft, almost cozy. There was the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. One of those nights when the world outside seems to be slowing down, taking a deep breath. I looked up when I heard Emma's footsteps approach. She came into the living room, her face soft but serious. "Mom," she said, a little hesitantly. I closed the book, giving her my full attention. "What's up, sweetheart?" "I need to talk." She sat down beside me, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her hoodie. I waited, knowing this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I know I messed up. I didn't mean to hurt you, and I know it's going to take time for you to trust me again. But I want you to know that I'm doing my best to make things right." I nodded slowly, watching her. There was a vulnerability in her voice that I hadn't heard before. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. "I'm proud of the way you're taking responsibility. But don't think it's just about the money, Emma." "You know that, right?" She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. It's not just the money. It's everything I took from you. Your trust, your love. I can't take that back, but I want to try. I really do." I felt a lump rise in my throat. There were still so many things I didn't understand, so many things I was still hurt by. But in that moment, sitting beside her, I felt a flicker of hope. "You're going to have to work at it, Emma." "We both are," I said gently. "But I believe in you. and I believe in us. This isn't going to be easy, but we'll get through it." She leaned her head against my shoulder, and I let her. We sat in silence for a long time, just letting the weight of everything hang between us. But the silence didn't feel like it used to. It wasn't thick with anger. It was the kind of quiet where both of us were healing in our own way. The next few weeks brought small but significant changes. Emma kept up with the repayment schedule, working part-time at a local cafe and making payments when she could. She even started saving a little of her own money, setting it aside for future college expenses. It wasn't easy. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes some nights, the toll it was taking on her. But I was proud of her. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes wafting through the apartment. I blinked awake, the soft light of dawn filtering in through the kitchen window. I smiled, hearing Emma humming softly to herself. It was a small thing, but in that moment, it felt like the world was a little less broken. I walked into the kitchen to find her flipping pancakes, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. She looked up when she heard me, her face lighting up in a way that made my heart swell. "Good morning, Mom," she said, her voice a little shy but warm. I stretched, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Good morning, kiddo." She slid a plate of pancakes in front of me, and I sat down, taking in the sight of her. The girl who had once looked at me with anger and rebellion now stood before me, making breakfast and offering me a plate like she was trying to mend a small piece of our broken relationship. "Thanks," I said, taking a bite. The pancakes were fluffy, the way I liked them. She sat down across from me, her hands folded together. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything." I put my fork down, looking at her. "Emma, we've been through this. I know you're sorry, but more than that, I know you're learning. That's all I can ask for." "Just keep learning," she nodded, her eyes searching mine. "I will. I promise." We ate breakfast in companionable silence, the tension between us feeling lighter, easier. The sound of the rain had stopped, leaving behind the soft hum of the city outside. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. There were still days when the weight of the past crept back into our lives. There were still moments when the distance between us felt too wide to cross. But with each day that passed, I saw my daughter, becoming more herself, her own person, with dreams and mistakes, and a future she was starting to build on her own terms. And I realized something. I realized that I didn't need to be the perfect mother. I didn't need to have all the answers. I just needed to be there, to listen, and to let her make mistakes. Because that's what growing up is, and in a strange way, this was our new beginning. A few months later, Emma came home from school with a letter in her hand. I noticed the envelope right away. It was from the admissions office at her top-choice college. My heart skipped a beat. She walked in, handing me the letter with a nervous smile. "I thought you should open it." I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as I tore the seal open. Inside, the letter read, "We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to the University of Massachusetts Amherst. We are excited to welcome you to our incoming class of 2027. I looked up at Emma and she was staring at me, waiting. We didn't say anything for a moment. Then I pulled her into a hug. "You did it," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. "You did it." She hugged me back, and for the first time, in a long time, it felt like we were both exactly where we were supposed to be. The day Emma received her acceptance letter to college was one of those rare moments where everything aligned, like all the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle fitting together just right. It was the kind of moment I had been dreaming of for years, but now that it had arrived, I could barely grasp it, the college she'd been hoping for. The future I had worked so hard for. It was all falling into place. And yet, as I held her in that hug, I realized that the real journey hadn't been about saving money or making sure she got into a good school. It had been about building the trust and understanding between us. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about the money she'd spent or the way I'd felt betrayed. I wasn't thinking about the anger or the hurt. I was thinking about the woman my daughter was becoming, strong, independent, and determined. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, pulling back slightly, studying my face. I smiled, wiping away a stray tear. "I'm more than okay. I'm proud of you." Her face softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw her smile with the kind of warmth that only a mother and daughter could share. The next few weeks passed in a blur. We focused on getting everything ready for Emma's departure to college. There were forms to fill out, dorm supplies to buy, and her acceptance letter had come with a list of orientation dates I couldn't help but read with a mix of excitement and sadness. Emma had worked hard for this. But in my heart, I was still processing what had happened. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt in the way I used to be. But I was aware. I had learned something important during those months of silence, anger, and rebuilding. I had learned that as much as I wanted to protect her from mistakes, I couldn't. She had to make her own decisions, her own choices, even the wrong ones. But what I could do, what I had to do, was be there for her when the consequences of those choices arrived. We were both learning how to be real with each other. There was no perfection to strive for anymore. There were no grand plans. There was just us, trying, failing, and growing together. The night before Emma left for college, we sat on the couch in the dim light of the living room, a quiet finality hanging in the air. The suitcase by the door was packed, her room was almost empty, and there was a strange, bittersweet feeling in my chest. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in a long time. She was still my little girl in so many ways, but she wasn't anymore. She was turning into a woman, a person who would make mistakes and learn from them, just like I did at her age. "Are you nervous?" I asked her, my voice soft. She shrugged, but her smile told me everything. "A little," she admitted. "But excited. It's going to be weird, though, not seeing you every day." I chuckled, my eyes stinging a bit. "I know. I'll miss you too." "You'll be fine," she said, the confidence in her voice now more than just a facade. "I'll be fine too. I'm ready, Mom." "I know you are," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But just remember, you can always come back to me no matter what. Even when things get tough." Her eyes softened and she nodded. "I will. And I promise I won't forget what we've been through. It's been a crazy year, but I'm grateful for it. Even the tough parts," I smiled, squeezing her hand. "You'll do great things, Emma. I know you will." She looked at me, and in that moment, I knew she was ready. She wasn't the same person who had taken my savings without thinking, or the teenager who had pushed me away. She was stronger, more capable, and more self-aware. But most importantly, she knew that no matter where she went or how far she traveled, there was always a place for her here. Emma left the next morning, and the apartment felt emptier than it ever had before. I didn't cry when I waved her off at the door. Maybe I was too proud of her to break down. Or maybe it was because I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. She had taken a step into the world, and I had to let her go. But that didn't mean I was letting go of her. Not really. I still had a piece of her with me, always. That night, as I sat alone in the living room, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the hurt, the long process of rebuilding. I thought about the lessons I had learned, the way I had learned to listen better, the way I had to let go of control, and how I had learned that love isn't always about giving what we think someone needs. Sometimes it's about letting them make mistakes, letting them learn, and trusting them to find their own way. And I thought about Emma, how much she had grown over the past year, how she had taken responsibility for her actions and worked hard to make things right. She wasn't the same girl I had raised. She was becoming someone new, and that was okay. It wasn't perfect, but love never is. It's messy and complicated, but in the end, it's worth it. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. No matter how tough love can be, it's still love. Love isn't always about being easy or comfortable. Sometimes it's about setting boundaries, making tough decisions, and letting go when you have to. But in the end, love is what holds us together. Now I know I can't protect Emma from everything. I can't shield her from every mistake or heartache, but I can be there for her. I can be the mother she needs, not perfect but real, and that's enough. So as I sit here, thinking about all of the things that have happened between us, the fights, the tears, the silence, and now the forgiveness, I realize that this is what family is all about. The messy, beautiful, complicated bond that ties us together, even when we don't always understand each other. I think about Emma and wonder what her next chapter will look like. What will she face? What choices will she make? But I don't worry as much anymore, because I know that no matter what happens, we'll always find our way back to each other. And maybe that's the real victory. Would you have done what I did? Would you have forgiven her? Or would you have cut ties? I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments. And remember, it's never too late to rebuild, to forgive, and to grow. If you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and support the channel. I'll see you in the next one.